Boom, and we are live with another episode of the Brown Water Banter podcast. My name is Jared Seymour.
My name is Joey
This is
Cates.
Joey Cates, and we got a good show for you in the studio. Trevor can't get enough, man. He is back once again to talk to us about fisheries management. As you've probably seen him on the show plenty of times before, we were talking about that. He is obviously with the DMR, Department of Marine Resources, and this is one of their episodes for the month. And we also have Marcus in here from Mississippi State University. We're going to be talking about the same thing, fisheries management, how we got here, a lot of cool tagging stuff that we've done in the past, but it's going to be a great show. Before we jump into that, like we always do, we have to thank the people to keep the lights on for us over here at the Brown Water Studios. Dr. Robbie Williams, right over there at Southern Magnolia Smiles, located on Washington Avenue in Ocean Springs, man. Look them up on the socials at Southern Magnolia Smiles. It's 2026. It's time to get those teeth brushed up and looking purty. You can give them a call at 228-215-1202 and tell them Brown Water sent you. If you need legal representation for any reason, Taylor and Cox Law Firm is right here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. They have been practicing law for a long time. Jackson County, George County, and Greene County. Tyler's actually been all over the big news platforms right now. Yeah, it's kind of impressive here. So they specialize in felonies, misdemeanors, DUI, family law, divorce, child custody, and apparently defamation. So if you need representation, Taylor and Cox Law Firm is the one for you, man. Give them a shout at 228-696-0111. And again, tell them Brownwater sent you and not the major news outlets. Forever Young Men and Women's Health. This is Kendrick in the photo, man. It is coming up, thank God, towards the end of summer, but it's never too late to prioritize your health. Forever Young Men and Women's Health's motto is bringing medicine, health, and exercise together to help men and women live their best lives. Believe it or not, they specialize in hormone replacement for men and women. Book an appointment with him and go in there, and he'll draw some blood, do some lab work, see where you're deficient, and get you right back on track and feeling better. You can give him a call at 228-363-6623. And again, tell him Brownwater sent you. Insured Roofing is coastal Mississippi's trusting roofing experts. They specialize in roof replacements, repairs, storm damage restoration, you name it. You can check them out at insuredroof.com. That's ENSURED roof.com, or give them a call. They've been running some specials, man. They do the thing too where they can clean your roof up. If it's got that black mold looking stuff that runs down the shingles, they can get rid of that for you. You can give them a shout at 228-797-7667. And we appreciate them sponsoring us again here this month on the show. So go check them out. Dewey Do Bugs in D'Iberville. They have the best boiled seafood on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And I'm not just saying that because they are sponsoring the show. We've been going there and spending a lot of money with them for a while now. We've hosted a lot of tournaments with them, but right down there by the Scarlet Pearl in D'Iberville. If you haven't been down there, go check them out. Look them up on Facebook, Dewey Do Bugs. That's DEWYDEWBUGZ. Dewey Do Bugs. Larry's they're doing some cool stuff down there. So go check them out. That's right. And if you need a sign, and that I'm talking about stickers for your business, stickers for pretty much any reason you would need that, all the way up to like the massive signage you see out front of these big businesses that's lit up, neon, LED, whatever. MikeStickers.com is right here in Gulfport. They're local, and they can take care of you from design to finished product. All of our stickers that we order come from Mike Stickers. We don't need a big signage, but I take that back. We put signs on our trailer.
Sign,
yeah, that's right. That big decal on our trailer.
The one that used to be on Lemoyne, he did too.
Yeah, that's right. So pretty much, if you can think of it, he can build it for you. MikeStickers.com. They're also on Facebook. Just type in Mike Stickers, will come right up, or give them a call at 586-615-3636 and tell them Brownwater told you about them. Joey, did you beat me this time?
No, it kind of flaked off, so I just said heck with it. I got about halfway through it.
Right,
yeah,
cool. Yeah, I thought maybe you beat me. It's been a few rounds, I've been winning a lot of them. So, but anyway, all right. Well, gentlemen, thank y'all for sitting through that. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Trevor, for coming back, getting in the hot seat. You never learn your lesson, and we appreciate that about you. We appreciate you being here for the first time. Where, Joey, do you want to? Should we start
with that DMR logo?
There you go. That's why I asked you to remind me. Boop, there it is. All right.
I don't know. You tell me, Trevor. Trevor's got Cliff Notes over there. He's got all kinds of stuff. So this is going back to, when did this even start? We talking about rowboats. We talking about Columbus. When did the fish management systems start?
That's what I was getting. Fishing. Yeah. This is the big umbrella term, right?
This is the big umbrella. So it's not quite when fisheries management started. It's the quintessential example of why fisheries management exists and how it formed in the modern age.
That's a good way to frame it. I like that. Yeah.
So before I start, when I left the house, I got told 4 different times that I better look at the camera and say hey to my kids.
Do it.
Because
Do it.
that's what I did last time. So
Right there. That's
hey,
you.
There you go.
Ray Ray,
He'll-
hey, Lily.
He'll sign
They're gonna sit there
autographs
and watch.
later.
Yeah,
he'll sign
yeah.
autographs
Dad
later.
with the shout out,
Yes,
man. I
right.
like that.
They
I
would
like
not
that.
let me leave the house without
Hey,
that.
and if they're watching right now, you can comment in the comments, and we can read stuff off to them. You can tell us stuff that we need
Yeah.
to know about them.
Christmas
Dad.
list,
You don't
birthday
want-
list, any
yeah.
of that stuff.
You don't want to do that. We'll never stop.
Hey, the engagement, baby, at a few
That's
algorithm.
right.
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So we're going to try to do a history lesson, and to some it might be extremely boring, but to me this was one of my choices for a subject. Obviously, usually when I come here, it's more complex topics or more controversial topics. This is one I think that kind of builds a historical perspective that, a lot of times we gloss over. Most of the time in the fisheries realm, especially in the performance realm, we think about what did I do last year? What was 5 years ago? What was the system like within the span of what I can remember, what I want to recall? And usually it doesn't go back decades, or in
Right.
this case, centuries.
Right.
So that's what we're going to attempt to do here. I brought along Marcus. Marcus does a lot of the same things I do. He deals more in the research realm. And
Maybe we get an introduction real quick.
Yeah,
Being this is
absolutely.
your first time on the show, I
Yeah.
apologize for that. You're associated with Mississippi State University, is that correct? Kind of give us your background.
Yeah.
Trevor's explained his.
Yeah,
1,000
yeah. We
times.
already heard. We know.
Everybody's
we
heard
know
that
Trevor.
story.
Well, fellas, it's great to be here. Thank you very much for having me. Trevor, thank you for the invitation. My name is Marcus Drymon. I'm an extension professor at Mississippi State University. I also have an appointment with Mississippi Alabama Sea Grant. I've been with these institutions for almost 10 years, but I've been working in fisheries in the Gulf since about 2005, so about 20 years now. And, like Trevor said, we do a lot of the same things, but my work focuses on fisheries and how those things are managed.
Okay,
Yeah.
that was an interesting year.
Yeah, you sound like a salty guy. Like this was always what you wanted to do. I'm guessing, right? This is your passion.
This is what I have always wanted to do, since I was a real little kid, honestly. And
Yeah.
I'm one of those guys that got to choose a passion really young and just have the dumb luck to still be working in it
Really?
as an adult.
So
Yeah.
you're one of those people that's like you never work a day in your life. That feeling because you just enjoy everything you're doing always.
That's a fact. I travel a lot, and people always say, "Are you traveling for business or pleasure?" And I always say, "It's both." Honestly,
yeah.
technically it's work, but it's hard to call it work because it's so much fun.
Yeah.
That's
What
awesome.
kind of traveling? I mean, where are they sending you?
I was in Bimini, the Bahamas, 2 weeks ago.
Oh God.
I'll be in Hawaii next month.
Oh, no wonder he loves his job.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Trevor, are you going with him? Are you?
No.
DMR's not sending you
No.
to the
No,
Bahamas
no.
until
He
I'm-
gets to go to Latimer and back to Biloxi is the only place he gets to go.
yeah,
Yeah.
Gills every now. and
Yeah,
then.
yeah,
I go to meetings across the Gulf. He goes to meetings across the world.
I hear that.
Sweet.
Okay.
And this is all for research conventions, I'm guessing, right?
It is research, either doing research projects in other areas or meeting about certain issues, certain issues that are the same here as they are in Australia, for example, or South Africa and places like that. So that's a lot of how science is advanced, is talking to other people in other regions that are experiencing similar problems and then trying to put your heads together.
I love
Sweet.
it. I love it. Can you give us your educational background?
Yeah.
How you got into all this?
Yeah, sure. I went to college at Coastal Carolina University in South Carolina,
Oh,
great
yeah.
state of South Carolina. Then I went to graduate school in Charleston, the College of Charleston, and then graduate school again at the University of South Alabama. So that's where
Okay.
my PhD is. From.
Coastal
All right,
Carolina.
nice. Yeah.
They're always in the World Series College World Series every once in a while.
They
right?
are
Yeah.
nowadays. That wasn't the case when I was
Oh
there.
yeah, they got a little better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they got a little better.
I got you.
USA's football team got way better from
Yeah.
when I was there
Yeah,
briefly.
they didn't even have one when you
I
were there the
don't think
first
they
year.
did. Yeah, yeah.
They,
They
did,
did.
they didn't have one when I was there either.
Okay.
That dates me. So yeah,
Yeah,
Mm.
good for them. They've been
Yeah.
they've been doing well.
that's right. That's right.
All right,
All right,
so,
so then
Trevor, give it to us.
Yeah.
When, what year are we talking? When did this start? When did this come
So,
about?
Do we all remember when Columbus sailed the ocean blue?
I do.
1492.
1492.
That's
sir.
right. So before that, there's a hypothesis out there that the Basques, which were a people of Spain and Portugal, actually had found the New World, and it was their secret fishing spot, right? Because the story is that the Basques would come in with their boats loaded full of salted cod, which they
Okay.
called bacalao. But salted cod, I'm trying to think of a similar nature, but back in that day, you had to have a long shelf stable protein to be able to travel long distances.
Right.
Food and refrigeration obviously wasn't there. So protein was a limiting factor. Salted cod was one of the primary proteins that was used for all this. So the bass were coming in with loads of already salted and dried cod, and would never tell anybody where they got it from.
See how far back that goes?
Yeah.
Lying about and
You're not getting my numbers,
That's
bro.
right.
Not even
Long
gonna get it.
time,
Yeah,
dude.
I got it.
Yeah. So the hypothesis is that they found the cod grounds along the eastern seaboard and were using the shores, which had the right climate, relatively dry, had the sun, and were essentially drying cod on those shores and bringing them back into the market. Now, the impact of cod in its early days can't be understated. I said it was a principal protein source. I mean, obviously you had hardtack, you had, some of the gizzard shads, your estuarine fishes that might have been pickled or smoked the same way, that kind of stuff. But really, salted cod was not only a food for the aristocracy and and the higher ups, but it was also food of the common people. And just like we have grades or tiers of tuna or steaks today, there were grades and tiers of salted cod, right? So you had basically a young economy in the United States, and you had old economies within Europe and everything else.
Right.
That cod was a principal trade. It was making money. It was a huge product. And when they discovered the new grounds after the New World, I mean, literally the conversation was you could walk across the cod from the Atlantic over into Canada and over into the Northeast. That's how many there were. And
I believe it. I mean,
Yeah.
think about the fishery that we have now and how much is out there now. Think about it before it was untouched.
Yep.
I could
Right.
only imagine
Well,
what it looked
look
like.
at the pictures that we've shown on this show before of just like the 60s with people doing when they
standing
first
on mounds of oyster shells.
right.
Like,
Well, I'm saying like the 1960s when they were first starting to kind of do the charter services around
Right.
here. But and then you go back to the schooner days. That's the 1800s,
Yep.
this late 1800s,
and we'll get to
right?
that one too.
Okay, yeah, but and like Joey's talking about just oysters for days
Yeah.
and days and
Can
days.
you imagine
right?
how good of a fisherman you were if you fished if we go to a pond that hadn't been fished in 20 years, you
Right.
think
you'd be the
you're
best guy.
you're like,
He's the
I'm-
best fisherman I've ever
yeah.
seen.
Yeah.
Bassmaster, sign me up. I'm going.
That's
there.
right.
Like,
That's right.
so you can imagine the same thing would happen in the wide ranging ocean a little bit, but really you saw the exploitation begin to increase throughout the 16 and 1700s. It was a principal part of even our nation when it first started. When it came to trade, it was one of the principal catches in the Northeast, and even when there was talk of independence and everything else, a lot of the conditions of the Northeast states were built around fishing access and fishing rights.
Okay.
Right? Because one of the links that they had was between the slave trade and the Caribbean countries and everything else. They were selling this salted cod because it's what fueled ships to be able to go to different places and have protein. So, principal part of the American economy. There was even a pejorative assigned to those who made a lot of money called the codfish aristocracy. So they had, gilded cod carvings all the way up their stairs up in the Northeast, and there were coins with cod on them, and there was a carved cod at one of the town halls that stood there forever.
Yeah.
I mean, just a huge part.
Making all that
Yeah.
cod money.
That's right. It was
Got
cod
that cod
money.
money.
Yeah.
How are we fishing for these? And those, are we pulling nets? Are we out of the boat? Are we in the boat? How does
So
that
in your
work?
shallower fisheries in Iceland, you had a lot of net fisheries and stuff like that, but you also just had hand lines, right? So that's individuals out there putting down basically dipped rope, nylon, couple hook rigs, that kind of stuff, and just bringing them in by hand.
That
Okay.
sounds like
mean,
work, dude.
Well, if you got to eat,
they're
you got to
not-
eat.
right,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
And by that point, they're so numerous. If you find the grounds and you're consistent, you're catching fish. So I mean, it's hand over fist. It's an endless resource to them, right? That's a
Right.
pretty big thing.
Right.
Pretty commonplace description. Even in the beginning, there was a guy that I would akin to myself and Marcus that existed in Britain. His last name was Huxley. His determination of the cod population was essentially endless and couldn't be touched. Right. So that was the chief fishery scientist at the time. You could call him the premier biologist. And
He's saying you can't overfish this.
That's right.
It can't happen.
you can't touch them. And anytime there was a dip or anything else like that, he attributed it to migration, which happened
Right.
throughout the fishery, right? It was a mobile species. It would move. It would sometimes disappear from one ground, show up at another before the major concerns began. But that's kind of the thought process here, is that everyone from top to bottom, there's plenty of cod, there's plenty of resource. No matter what,
Wear 'em
nothing's
out.
going to
Yeah.
happen to it.
Well, and as you're describing, those techniques again are not the commercial
Invasive.
commercial
Yeah.
way we think of today. They don't have engines, right? And you're
Mhm.
still in that time frame, right?
That's
So
right.
it's still all sail. It's still all hand done. Like there's no machinery
Yeah.
yet. So he might have been a little bit correct there in that assessment.
Yeah, in his perception of the population at the time, he thought it couldn't be
Right.
touched. Now
Right.
he came in around the time when the fleet was beginning to mechanize and have those
Okay. Okay.
abilities. His projections or his predictions just came a little bit too early.
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
kind of jumped the gun on it. So obviously, you get through the American Revolution. We've got stocks. Everyone's still relying on this as a chief protein source and all that. And really, what you see is the fishery begins to shift in its dynamics. So this isn't a foreign thing to everybody, right? We've seen fleets shift even in a few decades, right, and how the stock is being pursued, right? Not maybe in gear as much as you see nowadays, but technology as it's
Right.
increased and changed, right? People are running just in, let's just say, 3 decades, right? You've got
Yeah.
boats with 4 motors
Oh,
on the back.
yeah.
that
Yeah, I can
Yeah,
run
yeah.
90
Yeah.
miles in
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
hour and a half.
with no
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, yeah.
And about 30 years ago, you didn't have nearly amount of
No.
the recreational fleet doing that. So, in essence, what you're seeing, I think, is on a more grand scale when it comes to the mechanization of the fleet. You still see that same thing; it just occurs in different ways. But you saw a shift over into long lines and really the schooner fleet. So the schooners in the Northeast, it was designed as basically a multi-sail boat that was wider and faster, meaning you could carry more cargo and you could get there and back in a quicker way. However, they were inherently dangerous. So I got a stat sitting right there, but basically the toll between 1880 and 1897 alone was 1,614 Gloucester fishermen, and I think there was another one that fishermen deaths accounted for more deaths than the entire area in a given year.
From
That's how
the
dangerous it
schooner.
was from the schooners,
And
right?
that was overweighing them, just badly built.
Yeah, so I mean,
weather.
they were built for their purpose. They were built for speed, but they were inherently unstable once they
Right.
got
Right.
under load. And so when you're fishing that wide
Mhm.
hull,
It can
you
probably.
only have so much room. And if you get to a storm, which is relatively unpredictable in that time, even now
Mhm.
with modern weather apps and everything else, they weren't able to look it up and say, "Oh, got a squall coming. Let's turn it in."
Right.
They were basically
Caught
out
in,
there.
caught in the middle of it
Yeah,
with
they
a
had
full load of fish.
Nowhere to go.
nowhere to go.
Yeah.
So that's when I'm sure y'all are familiar with the blessing of the fleet.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Here, that was up there. It began up there in the Northeast, associated with a lot of these deaths and everything else. And so it was just a practice because it was such an inherently dangerous job, and because you had so many people dying on the water and at sea, that
They would
became a
bless you before you
Yeah.
went
Yeah.
out because
Oh,
there's
yeah.
a good
That just-
possibility
yeah.
you might not make it back.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just how it was. But they were providing protein. It was a stable resource, and they kept going. Right. That's why commercial fishing, it continues to be one of the most dangerous jobs that there is. But it certainly was in that time. Now the transition after that, right? So if you think about traditional sail, you move into schooners, which is faster moving, and then all of a sudden you adopt into this mechanization of an auxiliary sail vessel, which is a sail vessel that also has a motor associated with it.
Mhm.
Okay.
Think about how drastic of a change that is, right? No longer are you subject to the wind. Now
Right.
you are subject to wherever you want to go.
Correct.
It's just kind of slow.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
but that is able to shift the fleet from what we could perceive as a passive gear into a more active side of fishing, which is dragging trawls and dragging nets, which is what you start to see take over the fleet, not just in the United States, right? We're still talking globally. Harvest
Right.
is still occurring globally. It's
Mhm.
still a large demand species across, and there's competing interests. But you see these fleets start to bring up. You see trawlers start in the 1900s and 1800s, and they start to catch more fish,
Right.
which brings it more into the market,
Mhm.
which then furthers the need for more boats, brings
Mhm.
more fish to the market. And at that point in the early 1900s, you begin to see strain on the fishery occur where the catches start to become more erratic and there, starts to be these perceptions of potential issues, but they really weren't there on the forefront, right? They were perfecting the gear, perfecting the mechanism, perfecting the engine, getting back, getting beyond auxiliary power, moving into full power into trawl vessels. And then world conflict hits. in the form of World War One
Mhm.
and following of World War II. So typically that stops everything, especially that one. Right?
Yeah,
You're
because
not
we're
going to have.
Everything gets shut down. We're
That's
concentrating
right.
on the war.
we're
concentrating on the
commandeering
war.
ships at that time.
That's
We're
right.
building ships for war.
Whatever ships are capable of sailing the ocean, we can put it into a merchant fleet. We can move people
Mhm.
around. We can do what we need to. Fishing is the last thing on our mind outside of gathering resource or getting what we need. And really, what you see is like a neutral country like Iceland, which almost comes isolated during the war, take on a more prevalent fishing role, and their stocks come back. But you also see stocks kind of rebound everywhere. So the concern that began early in the 1900s was kind of coiled because you gave the stocks the ability to rebuild, especially during the period of World War II.
Right.
So they get done and they come back, and all of a sudden everything's back to normal. They're catching just as many fish. But you see another shift in the fishery, which I think is an important one to note. And that is the beginning ideas of countries and really naval fleets continuing functionally a standby fleet in forms of industrial trawlers that can also be swapped as needed when wartime comes. So you almost keep a standing stock of trained sailors in the form of fishermen and vessels available to you.
That can
And
go
so-
to war at any time.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so it can still be transport. So a lot of these countries like France, you see a heavily subsidized fleet where they're building out these trawl vessels for that specific purpose and pushing them out, which at one point allows the country to have it, but at the same point, a subsidized fishery needs to be able to make its money back in order to prove that it's
worth.
that's right. So you see that kind of occur across the board, but then you have a competing interest, which is now that everyone else has industrialized trawlers, all of a sudden it becomes an arms race to where each one of the other countries starts to do the same thing. And you see the same thing occur in the United States, right? You see a quick replacement, the build out, the financing, the development of large scale trawl vessels, which then kind of take over the fleet. And basically you're increasing catch again. You're becoming more efficient. You're getting these larger vessels. There's more nets in the water. And I think this is a good place to transition into. As you had all these fleets on the water and you had increased catches and you started to see a constraint on the stock, folks started thinking about countries, leaders started thinking about, well, maybe we should try to keep some of this resource to ourselves, right? Maybe we shouldn't have everybody accessing what we deem as our fish off
And then
our
we
coast.
start drawing lines.
That's right.
Yeah,
So
okay.
that's where you start to get these discussions of exclusive economic zones or territorial waters,
Right.
areas. It starts off as 10 miles, then it expands out. And you also had some players who didn't agree. So I don't know if y'all have heard about the cod wars.
Yes.
Okay, so cod wars, that's Britain and Iceland. And really what that was you had one country who would establish their own EEZ and what they wanted to be, and Britain held theirs pretty tight, but they wouldn't really obey anybody else's, specifically that country's. And so they pushed the boundary and continued to send their fleet as their stocks got depleted and go there. Well, the other country has a Coast Guard, and they didn't really like that too much. So they started sending the Coast Guard out to try to push them off. Well, that didn't work. They figured out that they could hang cutters on the back of the boat. And so as they encountered a British trawler, they just run up to it, run behind it, cut the trawl, and move on.
Sweet.
And there's some stats there. So I think over the period of 3 different wars, there were like 15 vessels that were rammed. Nobody died, thankfully. There was shots taken, basically warning shots across the board, and there were something like maybe hundreds of trawls that got cut and put to the bottom of the ocean because once you are able to re-gear, the only option you have is to go home.
You gotta go home. Yeah.
So
Trip's over with.
So that was kind of the formation of classical EEZs and how they were thought of, and we had that same notion. We did the same thing as the other countries and everything else, and really that established those territorial waters versus international waters. This thought of we want an area to ourselves. These waters are ours. This resource is ours. And really that's what you see with, as you continue concern about the stock, that's what you see with the first iteration of Magnuson, the governing legislation that deals with fisheries management. The first iteration of it wasn't what it is today. It was more of a mechanism to essentially isolate out foreign fleets out of our waters, right? And you would think that would be a good thing, right? Because what we're doing is essentially pushing effort out. But at the same time we were pushing the effort out, we began to bolster our own fleet.
Mhm.
And so really what we did was just a full replacement.
Just swapping flags.
That's right.
That's all you're doing.
Instead of
So-
somebody else coming in, we're going to build ours bigger.
Yep.
Pretty much.
All right. So essentially you get to that point.
Can I stop you there?
Yeah.
How were these numbers being taken at that time? Were they just going off of the stock assessments? How were they just going off what the fishermen said? Were they going out what the catch was coming back to the dock? How were they writing all this down, and were they documenting it all the way through?
So to my knowledge, formal stock assessments weren't really occurring at that time period. Catches were delineated because they were a marketable product. So obviously folks had records of how many fish they were catching, how many fish they were selling, because
the market.
that's right. So it was there. And I mean, it was a trade, and much like down here, you're talking about a product or a resource that essentially built the roads
Right.
of the area to start with, and was really the backbone of the economy. So there were detailed records of it. So you essentially get to that point, and you fall under the same plight that we saw with buffalo and with the passenger pigeon,
Mhm.
which everyone's familiar with the buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all
Nobody
familiar with? You familiar with the
Nobody
passenger
knows
pigeon?
about the pigeon.
No,
No.
let us know about it.
Yeah.
All right.
Real
So-
quick synopsis of the
All
passenger
right.
pigeon.
So the passenger pigeon was once one of the most numerous game birds in the entirety of North America. They said it would take hours, almost a full day, for a single flock to fly by at a single time. There was an estimate of like 1.4 million being taken in a single month from
Holy smokes.
Michigan, or one of the northern states.
Getting
during-
harvested?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Jesus.
So you're talking about a bird that was essentially black out the sky for a little
Right,
while in
right.
the amount. Well, due to habitat degradation, one, because we cut down the trees, the harvest of squaws, which are a delicacy over in France, so we'd harvest the small ones, and the hunting of adults, we actually hunted that passenger pigeon into extinction, right? Once one of the most numerous birds, hours long for a flight.
Whoops.
We've done it before.
That's right.
We've
Sorry.
done it many times.
And so almost what happened to buffalo
Right.
Mhm.
happened to the pasture pigeon. That's a great example of, where we're at. And that was the same thing. Resources were endless. It was just land-based, a little bit different.
Mhm.
Same thing happened with cod. So, Marcus, I'll give you this chance because I've been talking for a long enough time.
Yeah. He needs a drink of water.
Walk through basically the collapse of cod and what led to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We remind ourselves what Trevor did a great job of kind of setting that up. But if you think about putting dates to some of those milestones he gave, the Magnuson-Stevens Act, which was how it was originally designed, it was established by two senators, and they were the senators from the big commercial fishing states of Washington and Alaska.
Okay.
So that was only in 1976.
Wow.
So that's not too far. Yeah.
No.
That's
Not
the
at
year I
all.
was born.
Yeah.
Right.
50 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And basically, every 20 years since, there's been some sort of a change, some sort of an amendment to the Magnuson-Stevens Act. But that original act established, what Trevor and I know of as national standards, and it gives these tenets. You can't do this. You can't do that. The U.S. wants to put 200 miles between itself and other fleets, just the EEZ that Trevor was talking
Mhm.
about. So you see those types of things start to come into existence, and it wasn't like way in the distant past. It was
Right.
1976, and you think about cod. Trevor did a great job of teeing this up, but there's a really great book. It's written by a man named Mark Kurlansky, and it's titled Cod.
Okay.
And that's it. And
Nice.
he writes
Great
one word.
title,
He
yeah.
Creative
writes
guy,
one
very
word
creative
books. He writes a book called Salt, one called Cod, one called Oysters. But it essentially it talks about a lot of the things that Trevor discussed and how cod was so central in shaping, the early foundation of North America. But the long and the short of cod and why it can be so easily overfished has to do with its life history. And when I
Okay.
say life history, you talk about fisheries management, you can't really talk about fisheries management without talking about fisheries science, because they're like
Hand
two
in hand,
yeah,
yeah.
two sides of the same coin. So life history refers to how old a fish gets, how how its reproductive schedules and
Mhm.
cycles, its natural mortality and things like that. And the bottom line is cod get very old. And so when you remove them from a population at a rate that's unsustainable, it takes that population a long time to
Mhm.
recover.
Mhm.
We see that with other fish species here in the Gulf and elsewhere. But the older a fish reaches in its maximum age, the more careful you have to be as you start to fish those stocks. That's why something like a shrimp, it's essentially almost like a crop, like an
Mhm.
annual crop that you can harvest pretty heavily. Menhaden,
Right.
they live for a couple of years. That's why species like mahi mahi and triple tail are so interesting because they grow really fast and they have that live fast, die young kind of life
Outlaws.
cycle. Yeah, they're
Mhm.
outlaws.
They're
Outlaws.
outlaw
They're
fish.
outlaws. So
Yeah.
from a harvest standpoint, you can fish them harder than you can species like cod or groupers or snappers for that matter.
How long are we talking to mature with a cod?
They're more than teenagers by the time they mature, and they can live.
That's a long
I
time
should
for
have
a
looked
fish,
this up,
right?
but yes, it's a long time, and they can live not to be 100, but close.
Holy
Damn.
smokes.
And there are species of bony fish like snappers, groupers, etc. There are lots of groupers in the Gulf
Oh, I
that
believe
get
it.
to be
Yeah.
almost 100 years old.
Yeah. Now the grouper I can see because that's such a
Yeah.
big,
You're
fish.
just
I
hanging
don't
out in
know.
a hole
Yeah.
somewhere eating everything.
I'm
Well,
think-
take a redfish for example. How old do you think a redfish could get?
10 years old.
Times 5.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's
Really?
crazy. It's crazy. So in those situations, it's easy to understand how if you really take a whole big chunk of the population out, it's going to take that population a really long time
Yeah.
to recover.
I'm thinking about the opposite of that, and not fisheries, but like your feral hogs, right? Because they're the opposite. They breed super quick. And I don't know how long they live, but they it's hard to get them out of an area because of the way that they breed, right?
That's exactly right. And our sort of ocean analog to that is lionfish. That's one of the
Yes.
reasons why lionfish have been so destructive is that they reproduce really quickly and prolifically. So they can spawn every 4 days.
Yeah, I mean, you got
Jesus.
divers going down there taking hundreds and hundreds,
Yeah.
and then not even putting a dent in them.
Unfortunately, they're not. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. What specifically with the lionfish do they do that's so bad to the habitat around here? Is it they just eat the food? Like they're just
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, in general, they are another predator that's added to the system that's exotic or not natural, that really has no other current predator
Gotcha.
within that same system and
Gotcha.
isn't subject to the same parasites and all the issues that have evolved throughout the Gulf and the Atlantic and everything else like that. And I mean, they can tolerate any depth. So yeah, the divers might be taking out hundreds of thousands when they can see them, when they can dive. But divers can only dive so deep,
Yeah.
and they can only be so effective.
Right.
So if that species is ranging across, I mean,
Only
essentially
good thing
just-
is they're delicious.
I've heard that.
Well,
I have not had it.
And it's interesting to think about it. I always have to remind myself and other folks that lionfish are a natural part of Indo-Pacific ecosystems. So it's not that the lionfish itself is a bad guy. He's just a bad guy in a spot where he's not supposed
He's
to
in the
be.
wrong
Right,
hood.
right,
Yeah, he's
right,
in the wrong hood.
But,
Yeah.
to bring this back to fisheries management, that it is fortunate that they taste really good and that they're easily harvested by spear. But there's a conundrum there. So what happens if we were to, I mean, because you might ask, well, why don't we just start a commercial dedicated fishery for lionfish? And if I were to ask you that question, what's the problem with that?
They're
I
not
don't-
easily extracted, right? You can't really net them.
They're not easily extracted, but it gets back to what Trevor says. If governments are incentivizing fishermen to get into a fishery, well, then those fishermen are now invested in that fishery. And it doesn't make sense for fishermen to invest in a resource that they are actually trying
Makes
to
sense.
deplete.
I
Makes
got
sense.
you.
I mean, they'd be fishing themselves out of a job.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a situation that just doesn't make sense.
It's funny you say it that way because I don't know so much about the commercial guys. We've talked to them once at least
Few,
on the
yeah,
show,
yeah,
but
yeah.
we mainly look at everything through the lens of the recreational guys.
Mm.
But and maybe y'all can speak to this better. Like when it comes to the commercial side of things, do people respect what you just said? Like, do the commercial fishermen of X species, right? Do they say, hey, we need more regulations here, or we shouldn't be doing this? I think we're overfishing there because of them worrying about overfishing their
livelihood, yeah.
resource, or
I'll tell you, I mean, I'll take the first stab of that. Trevor will have his own thoughts, but I mean, in my experience over 20 years, commercial fishermen are some of the strongest stewards of the resource.
Okay.
They're the ones on the water, and so are we. We're all recreational fishermen on the water a lot, but these guys, these commercial fishermen, spend so much time on the water. They see trends
Mhm.
before most of us do, and they're quick to come to fisheries managers and say, "Hey, something's going on with red grouper. We need to tighten up. We need to change this regulation. We need to, insert a bag limit or a season closure." So they are the biggest stewards because they're protecting their livelihood.
Okay.
Right.
So you said maybe a little less pushback from those guys than maybe the rec side. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, a lot of it's just depending on situationally, of
Right.
course, with the issue that's at hand. But Marcus is right. I mean, for the most part, I mean, let's just talk about, the shrimp fleet, the finfish fleet, and then basically the amount that's being invested into all those, right? So they're not making new shrimp boats anymore. You have what you have.
Right.
And those boats are already very costly, and the repairs on them are very costly.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, they are very much stewards in that sense of they want a long-term investment to pay off and want to continue to be successful. And it's the same thing on the finfish side. When you're talking about the federal side, you're talking about investment in IFQs and vessels and long-range offshore vessels and everything else like that. So yeah, they want to protect the investment, and a lot of times you see them at Gulf Council meetings providing their input. A lot of times you're getting the calls on that side of relaying some concerns. And Marks is also absolutely right. Typically, fishermen see things before managers or scientists do
Mm.
because they are on the water constantly.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so typically you're seeing trends, you're identifying trends, and whether you can quantify them
Right.
or realize what's going on, the observation is there and it's quickly relayed. And that's usually when a person
Yeah.
like Marcus or even a management agency can step in and try to get to the bottom of, all right, let's see what's actually going on, examine our long-term data, and then figure out the answer to the question. But we still have to make it to the collapse. We got to get it back to the
Go ahead.
All
collapse.
right, bring us back.
All right, so 1976, Madison, you kind of expel the foreign fleets, you bolster your own American fleet. And at that point, you really start to see these volatilities in the world stocks of cod, and some of them are already fished out and depleted, and others are still going down. And really, what we see is a monumental collapse in the stock. 92% of the biomass gone. The fishery completely drops off a cliff. Now, you might say, how exactly does that happen?
Are we talking total fisheries or are we still talking cod?
We're talking cod.
Just
Okay.
cod.
Just cod. Okay.
Where do we fish cod? Do we even
Northeast.
say that? Like,
Gloucester up to Canada, all the way up to the tip up there, and then
Right.
across to Iceland and the
did we
North
go to
countries.
Alaska that way too? Is there cod any
So
on that?
there's other species of gadiforms, which is what cod is in, but most of the fishing over there is pollock and a
Maine,
couple
East
other
Coast,
species.
New York, Philadelphia, Boston,
Yep.
all that stuff.
All
over
the way
there.
up
Yeah,
that
okay.
that edge. So you see a monumental collapse, and the question is, how can it get that far, right? Because you would think before it just dropped off the cliff, you'd see warning signs.
Right.
And the fact is that warning signs were seen, but they weren't able to be reacted to really in a, I'd say in a manner that was good enough for fisheries management.
Okay.
And I don't think the issue was truly realized until the aftermath. So one of the things we focus on, and Marcus helps out with it a lot throughout the Gulf, is fishery independent and fishery dependent surveys. All right, we've talked about that on this thing before. Essentially, fishery dependent surveys are relying directly on the fishery for information. That's your trip ticket programs, the MS Krill program at the dock,
Right.
your biosampling to get fish ages and links by the fleet, stuff like that. Then you have your fishery independent stuff, which is the surveys that you do with highly standardized gears and selection protocols and everything else like that.
Mm-hmm.
Those things are typically conducted by the agency or a university. Those two things both give you signals on the fishery. One gives it to you from the fishery sense, the other gives it to you in a more spatially and temporally standardized way that typically we try to rely on when we're getting signals. Now, one of those things wasn't really occurring at that time period in the form of fishery independent surveys, but we did have the fishery dependent information that was coming from the fleet, and they were catching their fish, albeit at times they struggled, but it struggled over the last couple hundred years. Every now and then they'll disappear from one place and show up in another place. Kind of happens. So in general, it was written off, and what you saw was that you had some stability in the catches and the catch per unit effort. Right, so catch per unit effort is basically the amount of trawl time it takes to catch X number of cod.
Okay.
Right, and
So they were showing numbers.
So they were seeing stability there.
Yeah.
And what happened is that the technical term for it is hyperstability. The stock was showing hyperstability, which means we typically try to view CPUE as an index of abundance. Right, it's supposed to give us some signal of the population. If you're only catching 8 cod per trawl, and then you're catching 4 cod per trawl, the assumption is
less fish.
Yeah.
Our population dropped in half.
Right.
Right. But really what was happening is that you were seeing a stability. So it was continuing on at 8 cod per trawl. Right. That's just a number out of my backside. Right.
Yep.
But it was continuing on while really the stock was plummeting, because the stock itself began concentrating in smaller and smaller areas off the banks. Right, you can almost look to it off.
Same spot. Yeah.
So let's think about it offshore. Right, let's just say that the species was across the entire territorial waters of Mississippi out to 200 nautical miles, and by the end of the entire fishery in 1990, it was on
Deer
FH
Island
13.
Yeah,
it was in one localized area, which means you're fishing one localized area, which means the last bit of the cod that are in that area got swooped up.
Did you at that time? What time are we talking here again? What years are we in?
90, 91.
Right now, when you talked about what you just said. Okay, so did the fishermen not realize, or were they realizing it and reporting it or not reporting it? It's like, hey, we used to catch them over here and now we don't. Did they not? Did they notice where they had to start?
I think there were
pulling the
likely
trawl?
some realizations.
Okay.
How far stretched they were, I wouldn't be able to say, but there was also probably a good number that recognized that sometimes the cod stock was fleeting even in its best years and would come back in subsequent years just as strong as it ever had. So the signals were likely there. Whether they were listened to or whether folks threw out the warnings, I think is noted. I just don't know how.
Was the science there yet? I mean, you've mentioned direct and indirect, but did we know that this is a signal and this is what we need to be paying attention to yet? Or was it still, because like in science, right? Like, that doesn't necessarily mean that, it takes a minute before people can actually believe that that's true.
I'd like to think the idea was there and we likely had some signal of it. But at that point, I would say that the management system, the monitoring systems and everything else weren't robust enough. And by robust, I mean had the ability to detect true change in the population to really make that call to essentially shutter a multi-million-dollar industry across the board.
And, let's talk about that for a second. I mean, Trevor's analogy is a really good one, and to illustrate the difference between these two different types of data streams, let's just pretend this table is the ocean, but all the fish are kind of over here. Well, fishermen are going to go over here and fish because that's what they do. That's what they're exceptional at. That's the fishery dependent data. And that's useful for signals and stock assessment, et cetera. But the type of surveys that Trevor's also talking about, the fishery independent, so independent of the fishery, we would literally take a grid and turn this table into 100 small squares and then randomly out of a hat draw 10 of those squares. And that's where we would go sample. So we would be equally interested in sampling here where we get a 0 and over there where we get a 0 and here where we get a 1 as we are here where we get 20. So that gives us a much more population level estimate of what the whole population is doing. And then when you see that go from 8 to 4 to 2, you don't have to worry about, all the fish are congregating in one spot because you're so spread out and your stations are so stratified and randomized that all that's been taken into account. So for the value of those fishery independent time series is in the time. So if you've only been doing it 3 or 4 or 5 years, it's good and you need to keep it up, but it's not very useful.
Yeah.
The survey that I've got students out literally today, they're out on the water right now still doing our fishery independent bottom long line survey. We've now been doing it for 15 years.
Wow.
every year. And like Trevor said, when I say the same way, I mean exactly. We cut the bait the same way. We have the same, not just the same size of hook, the same model from the same manufacturer, the same length of
Constant variable.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
So having those two different data streams is really important. And back then, Trevor's right. We just didn't have enough of the scientific infrastructure in place and over a long enough period of time to be able to catch those collapses before they happened.
So was this the first fish on radar that we had to step back and say, whoa, this is getting out of hand? Or has this happened before?
It's the classic example.
Yeah.
And it's really, obviously, a really important fish for us as a country. But no, this has happened time and time again.
Yeah.
In fact, a more recent example, or a more local example, is red drum. If you look at red drum, and it's so interesting, red drum in the early 80s was really considered a trash fish.
Right.
Just nothing useful about it,
Yeah.
right? And this is an instance where one individual it changed the entire trajectory of that fishery. And you'll know who it is. His name's Paul Prudhomme.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Papadon.
Yeah, get your
Yeah.
cake back
Yeah,
in. Yeah.
So-
So eat black and redfish.
He comes
Yeah.
up with the concept of black and redfish. And in the mid 1980s, in 1 year, Louisiana landed more red drum than had been landed across the entirety of the Northern Gulf in like the past 10 years. So that fishery plummeted. And then from that year on and continuing till today,
Yeah, they still get smashed.
there's a moratorium. So
Mhm.
you cannot land a red drum in federal waters. So if
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
outside of 3 miles,
Yep.
you cannot land a red drum. There's still a federal prohibition on that species.
And does that go back to that's where they breed and the bigger ones live? Is that's the science behind that?
Yeah, and generally what you saw that management structure shift into is rather than targeting them through the gear that was going after and having spotter planes and everything else like that, you really saw it switch into this species can still be harvested, but, and it brings back to his point earlier in the discussion, right? We need to ensure that there is enough spawning stock biomass out there because they are such a long-lived species.
Mhm.
That's the part that we need to protect, are those who are, because they're maturing at around 5 years old, really. 26 to 30 inches is when they're beginning their transition and maturity. And so the thought is that as long as we can have enough that can escape out of the current slot limits of the different states and they escape into the population, that standing stock will always be there to supply recruits back to the fishery to keep the fishery going. And so you could see, let's just say in a hypothetical where something drastic happened along the coast and you saw a plummet in the red drum juvenile stock. If the adult stock is unaffected, you could easily see that fishery rebound in a span of 3 to 5 years because
The breeders are still there.
the biomass is still
Yeah.
out there and supplying recruits back into the fishery.
Mhm.
It's when you take the breeders out of the populations when we got to start all over and you got to do 10, 12 years.
I mean, if you're lucky, if you deplete a population too much, you
Mhm.
can literally, just like the passenger pigeon, you can literally fish something to extinction.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong here. You don't have to catch every single fish to fish
No.
them into extinction. You just got to tip that scale enough to where they can't combat natural predators, disease, and then find enough of, I would assume, of mates to
Mates.
actually breed,
You
right?
got it.
And
That's
then
exactly
boom,
right.
it the fire goes out.
That they're functionally extinct. There may
Mhm.
be 1 or 2 or 10
Right.
left, but not enough to sustain a population.
Right. And it's just a
Mhm.
matter of time before they're completely, you don't see them
Yeah.
anymore.
And the good news is that, in the modern realm, and even with cod, right, given its impact and everything else like that, we haven't really seen that level occur, especially now. And even with cod, right, you could turn back and say we completely changed the growth trajectory of the fishery. We changed the population dynamics, the habitat, a lot of stuff over there. But people are still catching cod in the Northeast today, albeit not at the same magnitude, biomass, or numbers. There's still a cod fishery there. It's a lot less, but the fish is still there. It just kind of, to me, serves as like that quintessential species of it's endless. There's no chance we can do something.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden we get there. And really, to bring all this back home into things we've already talked about before, right? It leads into what we're dealing with in the fishery management system of today. And a lot of the rules that are in place essentially exist as safeguards in order for that not to occur again to another species. So you saw reauthorizations of Magnuson within the time period, and you saw again a reauthorization in 2004, which is the Sustainable Fisheries Act, which began enacting things like ACLs and everything else like that, right? Annual catch limits, which we are familiar with because we talked about them for our red snapper, for the other states and everything else like that. And really it was predicated on, all right, we're going to start looking at these things in a more scientific way. We're going to have, science and statistical committees begin to review the assessments and the information available for a stock to dictate how much can be taken. And it's up to the managers to figure out the strategy within that amount that they can go out and harvest. Now, that leads into really what I think is the modern shift into the fisheries realm, which is you had the mechanization of the commercial fleet, and you had the catch of cod, you had the collapse of cod, and then all of a sudden you see kind of a shift occurring in the fishery since the 2000s, which is the increase of the recreational fleet. Right, so y'all talk about it. Usually when we're on here, everyone's got a boat. Everyone seems like there's boats going out. Not sure how people are affording it, but it's happening.
Right. They got plenty of money.
And so you just start to see these same scenarios kind of pop up in how the fleets transition, or how the sectors shift into different modes of fishing and begin to prosecute the stocks in a different way. And really what it does is cause fisheries managers and the fishery management system to have to be more dynamic to understand exactly what's going on with each one of these fleets and sectors, and try to make sure that the management system in place is enough to continue down the route that we strive for. That's when you get into, so we established ACLs in 2004, and we've kind of had this iteration. That's great, and it's a good logical system. If we have a population of X, we should only harvest Y. And if we only harvest Y over time, it should lead to a sustainability of the population over time. Well, that's great until you start having increased interaction from the recreational sector, in which you have to derive their catch, right? That's where MS Krill comes in. That's where the MRIP discussions come in and everything else like that. If we're using the historical knowledge of you can only catch so much out of a fishery for it to be sustainable through assessment or whatever else, and we have to calculate that number, when you begin introducing a new sector that you can't calculate as well,
because commercial is so regulated and also sold, so you can track it that way, right?
It's required electronic reporting,
right,
VMS systems and everything else like that. All of a sudden, you're bringing in another sector that's increasing in its participation, that's increasing in license sales, and you've got a system that can't readily and consistently give you what that number of harvest is. That, to me, that ACL system, which I've talked about before, right now is a struggle in its efficacy for fleets that are more dominated by recreational catch, or have a large proportion of recreational catch, because you start having these fluctuations in catches, and you start to butt up against the ACL, and all of a sudden you should be catching X amount and you keep overstepping it, so you reduce the season, which then constrains the very estimate producing system like MRIP or anything else, and you consistently continue to get these high estimates, and yet you keep ratcheting down the fishery and getting the same result, which is that negative feedback loop that led into red snapper in 2016 and 2017. And I really think it's what we're seeing in the modern day with Amberjack and really with gag grouper over there. Triggerfish is still, we're doing better on triggerfish. There's another assessment coming out with it, I think, pretty soon, but that's kind of bringing the whole picture in, right? You have shifts in fleet dynamics within sectors. We've had modernization of fleets across 100 years. Really the same issues that they were experiencing then, we're almost experiencing today. I actually got a chuckle because it was Kolansky's book, the cod book, and I was reading through it. And one of the solves that they had, right? They wanted to continue access to the cod fishery, but they knew that they couldn't have that much access. So someone out there proposed, well, what if we did a weekends only participation?
Where have we heard that before?
You know what I mean?
State of Louisiana.
Let's do weekends only participation in the cod fishery. And it was, this idea was quickly thrown out because an individual said that some of them work on weekends, so they can't participate in the fishery. And I was like, man, I have heard that exact thing 15 times.
Yeah.
So
Probably our great grandpa sitting around the table
Yeah.
doing the same thing.
There are no new ideas.
You've been chewing. I want to hear what
Well,
you've been anxious. Yeah.
I mean, Trevor's just made a lot of really, really good points. And I think to just build on a few of those, I think first and foremost, it's important to remember that recreational anglers are also really, really strong stewards of the resource.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
not that the commercial guys are the good guys. And I mean, they're both the good guys. Both those sectors really want to see thriving, healthy populations.
right.
It's exactly like Trevor said, though. A commercial fishery, a very small number of individuals, a very large harvest. Recreational fishery, very large number of individuals, each of which has a relatively small harvest. So, because we have such good systems in place to track commercial fisheries, electronic logbooks and VMS and AIS, and all these things, they get really, really, really heavily monitored. And so we have a really, really precise idea of what they catch. It's exactly the opposite. Anybody with a recreational fisherman,
Right.
anybody can go out, you buy a license and you can fish. And there are rules you got to follow. But for folks like Trevor to track what each of those millions and millions of folks are doing, I mean, it's an enormous chore. And it's super difficult. So it wasn't until about 10 years ago that so in the 2000s, when fishery management agencies finally realized, holy crap, recreational fishermen in and of themselves can have a really big influence on the stock. For a while, we thought it was primarily commercial fisheries. The rec guys, they have some, they harvest some, but not a lot. What Trevor's pointing out, well, for species like Amberjack, red snapper here in the Gulf, the rec guys are actually removing more of that biomass than the commercial guys. And they're so much more difficult to track. They're so much more difficult to understand what those numbers look like.
Yeah. Well, you're relying on the fishermen to report the catch
Yes.
most of the time.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of it occurs dockside surveys where we're putting eyes on the fish. Now, some of them come back to private docks, so obviously that catch doesn't get accounted for. You get the calls from MS Krill that ask you how many times you fished, and yeah, we're looking, assuming reliability, and I think it's a pretty good assumption at this point. I mean, the difference is that the federal constraint of a lot of these fisheries put them into the more of a pulse category, or you almost say very limited, right? So they're a pulse fishery that you're trying to get a handle on within a couple weeks, or in Amberjack's case, this about a month and a half. And so
Yeah.
you're trying to get enough intercepts dockside and enough effort calls in with responses with effort to be able to produce what you think is a reliable estimate, which can then be fed back into an age structured assessment with those removals to try to produce new management advice.
That
What
hurt
we
my
have
head.
seen-
Yeah, I
That
know.
just hurt my head
I
just
was like,
thinking
phew.
about that. I don't
Yeah.
even know what you just
Can you
said.
say that
right
one more
now.
time?
Yeah.
So-
Slow it down
The
for both of
you
us?
did the
Yeah.
Latimer version of it. Yeah.
All right. I'll put it this way, and you can correct me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong. I don't think there is a single stock assessment for Amberjack that has not found them to be overfished or undergoing overfishing. I might be wrong on one of those, but it's
Right.
had one of those designations for each one.
Right.
And if we
This is commercial and
this is
recreation
the
across the
stock.
board. Okay.
This is the
Okay.
Gulf stock.
Okay.
Within that time period, just the last decade, right? You've had numerous regulation changes. You've had numerous quota changes. You've had size changes.
Right.
You've
Season
had
lengths. Yeah.
The amount you can keep, it's one per person, right? You've had season length changes. You've had fishing year changes to adjust the season. All of those things have resulted in the same output from the assessment. So at some point, the question is this stock truly in that bad a shape? Or do we just not have a good enough data stream to get a good handle on it? I think it's there.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I agree with that 100%. And to put numbers to that, when you're trying to estimate removals from the recreational sector, how many fishermen do you think there are? Let's use the state of Florida. That's a good example.
A
right?
bunch.
How many? But how many is a bunch?
Recreational.
Recreational.
And I'm assuming we're going by licensure, right?
Private recreational fishermen that have to have a license.
Million.
In the state of Florida? No. No.
How many?
How many? I have no clue.
There's about 10 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
I thought you were high.
No, I
Yeah.
knew I was
10
low.
shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
10 million.
Yeah.
And that's just the guys and gals with licenses. If you're a senior citizen, you don't need one. And if
Yeah.
you're not 18, you don't need one. So 10,000 or 10 million people in one area making removals. And Trevor can have his folks out on the docks every day and
Yeah.
every hour of every day. You simply can't, that's a level you just can't measure. So you have to use these statistical tools to be able to extrapolate what those removals are. And the precision on that, it's difficult to be very, very precise. It's
Yeah.
like trying, when people do a census in the United States, they're not going out and literally
Mhm.
counting every person. There's a lot of math and statistics to kind of estimate that with a certain level of, error.
Right.
So back to Trevor's point, there's something in that stock assessment that we're not able to capture. Some source of mortality, some stock recruit relationship, some post-release mortality. Something is not allowing us to have accurate estimates of what that stock status really looks like.
So do you think that that the population is low and in danger? You think it's healthy? We just think that it's low because of what you just said.
Yeah, and
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure I
and
understood.
just
you right.
like we talked about the examples of fishery independent, fishery dependent, in
Mhm.
order to have a stock assessment that produces outputs relative to the fishery, both of those things have to be relative to, one, the biomass of the actual stock or their relative abundance, two, the actual removals that are coming out of the water.
Mhm.
And so you have the chance that maybe we just don't have a good fishery independent signal for this species, which is entirely plausible, right?
Yeah.
Because you're talking about the entire Gulf
Mhm. Mhm.
for that stock that ranges all the way out from, let's just call it 30 miles out to 70 in our waters and all the way down to 300 to 400 feet off the edge of the shelf sometimes. So not only do you need to know there, but you also need to know the removals. And in general, right, I've talked about this one with y'all when we were going through the MS Krill MRIP stuff. If I've got one person down there at West Beach and they see one amberjack and they write it down, the corresponding estimate is going to between 0 and 300,000 pounds, right? That's just
because that's all they have. That's all the data they have.
And that has been taken the same as another state, but at the same, in the same, and right there in that same realm, Florida struggles seeing amberjacks just the same as we do. Now they do see more on a regular basis, but their estimates are also wildly up and down. Right?
And in
So
Florida,
you can have
90% of them think they're trash fish. They don't even keep them. They don't even keep amberjack in Florida. Most of them.
Well, that's another
It's
thing.
crazy.
What happens to the fish that people catch and then throw back?
Bycatch,
Right.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
yeah.
Right.
So-
Whether yeah.
It's, I mean, I think some of my favorite sentiments about fisheries management. There's a great quote from a really mathematical and statistically intense book. It's written by this genius professor, and he says, "Fisheries science is not rocket science. It's a lot harder."
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with that more. And that same professor says managing fisheries is managing people.
Mhm.
We're really trying to make sure that all the user groups that value the same resource, because they all have different values. I mean, they all want to see a thriving fishery, but they all have different individual values, from an experience with their kids on the water catching fish versus, getting a product to sell to make a living.
Mhm.
So guys like Trevor have an incredibly hard job, and they do an incredibly good job at trying to balance all of those things.
What's the leading thoughts or whatever on the rec side of how to get better assessments? Is it what you've talked about previously and the way we're trying to move to the new measurements that we're trying to move to?
So I think I had an episode with y'all a while back where I threw out what I thought
Mhm.
is a realistic path forward in terms of management strategies for a lot of our fisheries. The first one is kind of we've danced around it, but it's finding what gives you signal, right? You do that in your daily lives no matter what. When you're trying to figure out what's going on, you look for something to provide you signal that gives you a good, clear picture of what's happening. We have to do that for each one of these fisheries, like amberjack, right? Because I don't think we're getting a good signal for any of those to be able to run an assessment. But there's also a lot of species that we assess, right? And I can name them: vermilion snapper, Spanish mackerel, gray triggerfish, gray snapper. There's a lot of resource that is expended. Gulf tilefish is one of them.
They're
Deep water
delicious.
grouper, I think I throw into that one, right? There's a lot of these things that the federal government, the science center folks who are extremely smart, capable analysts, all that, they'll spend a year and a half, 2 years running an assessment, right? And at the end, sometimes what we find out, and where my assumptions lie, is that we could have done that by looking at 3 different figures, right? Which is the fishery CPUE over time, the overall catches, and whatever fishery independent signal that we might have had, and kind of make that thought of, is this fishery stable? Is the biomass growing? Is it neutral? And if that's the case, we shouldn't be going down the route of running complex stock assessments when there are other species to prioritize and figure out. Right. So really, you've got a couple of complex species that likely need a little bit harder look. A lot of these can be put more on the cruise control pattern of, it's working now. They're open year round. We're not seeing any shift in harvest. We don't expect these things to shift, but as soon as we get a signal that shows us something negative is happening, we can look closer at it. Let's put our resources into those things that are more complex, that currently are restricted in access, and we have some of these questions we want to answer. I mean, to me, we can manage fisheries in a much more simple and straightforward manner than we've currently constructed. And that construction is due to the subject we talked about today, which is the overfishing and collapse of one of America's sentinel marine species. So,
And just following up on that, like Trevor, I have a lot of sympathy for the folks at NOAA Fisheries, the Southeast Fisheries Science Center. They're tasked with an incredibly long list of things to do, including these very long and complicated stock assessments. But we're part of the reason that happened. We, as the public, demanded transparency in the process. So if we're going to have these stock assessments be transparent, that means everyone gets to peek behind the curtain, and there's long periods between each and every step. So we can't have it both ways. We can't ask for an agency to be really quick and nimble and responsive, and yet insist that as a general public, we have access to every step of the way. So it can be really transparent. That's going to make the process take a long time. And but I also personally am of the opinion, I share Trevor's opinion, that many stocks can be managed using very relatively simple stock indicators. And there are a lot of really, really smart fisheries biologists in other parts of the world that think that exact same thing. And they're doing that. They're doing that pretty well.
I was going to say, who's giving us the pushback? If y'all are the guys in the trenches with the data, the science behind it, why are we not transitioning to that? Is it a legislative thing? Is that?
So, I mean, you got to understand, which we've talked about, which is the dichotomy between state fisheries management and federal fisheries management and federal species, right? So right now, while we try to sort out the entire landings situation on the recreational side and everything else, we're using index-based management, which if you look in your fisheries techniques book, it's not too far into it, right? Meaning that it's a pretty early on,
Page 5.
straightforward way of, we've got a fishery independent index. We're assuming its reliability to give us the signal that we need. As soon as it shows concern, we'll look a little bit deeper. But until then, this is going to give us the signal and we're going to rely on it. We can make that choice within the state because we're responsible for them. On the federal side, you've got multiple states involved, but you also have governing legislation and you have a federal agency that is directly tied to adhere to that legislation specifically and make sure they follow all the rules, all the procedures, everything else laid out, and you have competing sectors, large-scale sectors across the board. So I'd say the pushback doesn't come in the form of they think it's a bad idea,
Right,
or they don't like it.
right.
It's more of the institutional inertia associated with the federal process.
Yeah.
It's just one hard to break from because I hate to say it this way, but it feels like as soon as they break or depart, any lawsuit or anything else that comes through pushes them right back onto the same railroad that they've always been on.
That's anything
That's
political, right?
well, that's really well said. It's the institutional inertia. They are tied, letter by letter to that law that we talked about that was established in 1976. That dictates everything they do. So those smart folks in NOAA Fisheries, they'd love to try some of these new innovative approaches or a simplistic approach. They'd love to do all that. Their hands, in some respects, are tied. And just like Trevor said, when that starts to shift a little bit, maybe 2 steps forward and like 5 steps back, because they are constantly getting sued. constantly, because what pleases this user group infuriates
Mhm.
this user group. And so I I'm fond of saying, if you work for NOAA Fisheries, it's not that you can't please everybody. You really can't
Please
please
anybody.
anybody. You really can't.
Wow.
People are
Yeah.
constantly mad at
Yeah.
you. Everyone is. So
Damned
it's,
if you
Yeah.
do, damned if you don't.
you
Yeah.
seriously are.
So
No,
he
damn if
had-
you do. Yeah. You
Yeah,
said it.
yeah, same thing. Do we ever get on the same page locally with the MS krill? If we do a Louisiana krill, Alabama krill, Texas krill, Florida krill, if everybody gets on the same page, would that matter?
Yes,
Big time.
Okay.
Big
I
time.
think that would matter a lot. And even we've been working with so we put forth a proposal alongside us, Louisiana, Alabama, and Florida, to essentially have a statistician from an outside entity determine how comparable those estimates are to one another, right? It's pretty easy to make the assumption for LA krill, AL krill, and us, right? It's the same system outside of a few changes that are meant to benefit each one of the states locally in its design. It's the same underlying principle. And even the review, once it was approved for certification, the statistical consultants, which I've said are much smarter statistically than
Both of us.
Marcus, way smarter than me, right? So they even said, these surveys are close enough in how they operate that you can likely come up with a combination of estimates and be able to forge basically an estimate and combine them all together without any issue. The question is the surf side, which is Florida, which on its face is essentially the same thing. They're gathering their estimates from a license frame and then scaling it or increasing it for the perceived noncompliance and what they find within their surveys and everything else. Functionally, that's how the same as how the krill surveys work.
Mhm.
So
You're talking
get
about
off
East
of-
Coast when you say Surfside.
That's right.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
us. So it surfs. It's
Yeah.
the west coast of Florida.
Oh, okay,
West
okay,
Coast
okay,
So
okay.
the Gulf. And Texas has been doing their same survey since the 70s, and they are pretty well stuck to it. It'd be up to them whether they want to entertain trying to run some side by side with krill. But to your point, once all that comes to fruition, you essentially have a common currency across the board,
Right.
that is not only in scale in terms of magnitude, but is a regional consistent program
Yep.
across the board. So you lose a lot of the outlier issues that we've seen associated with all the species that I've talked about on here in our comparisons with emerald. You gain the regional consistency. You gain a more realistic level of magnitude and what you hope is a more relative tracking of what the fishery is doing on an annual basis, which means the removals at scale will be correct. So when they go to the assessment and they track what the actual fishery is doing, you'll get a more realistic output from the assessment for management advice, which should lead down the route of a better management framework.
And if I could just take a second to applaud Mississippi for doing that, because what they did is they said, all right, Louisiana's got this thing that's working and the fishermen are happy. And yeah, it's expensive, but man, they're doing it the right way. So they said, Mississippi said, well, rather than us trying to reinvent the wheel,
Right.
let's do what they're doing. There's so much advantage to that. Mainly, like Trevor said, now these two different currencies are the same. These two different surveys are collected in the same language.
Mhm.
So you can
Yeah.
just say this plus this equals, 1 + 1 actually would equal 2 in that situation,
Right.
which is almost never the case, surprisingly enough.
Right.
Every state wants to do their own thing. But, at the very least for Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, like these three states have said, hey, this is a big enough deal. We need to get this right. We're going to invest the time and money and energy and do it all the same way. And I have big hopes for it. I think it's going to be fantastic.
Is Texas just being Texas?
Yes.
A little bit.
Okay. Well, I can see Florida because that's pretty much two different fish or three different fisheries.
It is.
I mean, you got the East Coast, West Coast, and you got the Keys.
The Keys.
Totally different fisheries. Texas is just being Texas, if I had to guess.
You got it. I can
Nice.
say that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there it is. Yeah. So you think we'll ever see that, or they're just going to be outliers
It's up to
until we
them.
can figure it out?
I mean, as a state partner, we'd certainly provide them any support they would need to try
Right.
to do it. Louisiana's been a great support system for us to help us get off the ground. I think there's definitely some benefits they would have to doing it, but it's up to their leadership to determine whether they want to go down that route or not.
I like it. I got a couple things before. You got anything else on that?
No, I'm good.
I wanted to know. Recently, y'all just had the Gulf Council meeting, which was right here in Biloxi, wasn't it?
Mhm.
Did I read-
Mhm.
Golden Nugget.
Yeah, the Golden Nugget. If you could give us just kind of 30,000 foot view of what was discussed, if there's anything coming out of that meeting that the recreational audience or commercial for that matter that you could let us give a heads up on, or good, bad, ugly.
Yeah. So essentially, the Gulf Council, every time they meet, which is every 2 months, they have a litany of amendments that they work on, and they're usually framework amendments that span across the time of 18 to 24 months, depending on what the process is. The ones they covered this time were, flexibility and
Mhm.
post accountability measures for the red snapper fishery. They talked about essentially Seafire 2.0, which is the federal for hire charter reporting system. Its initial input was basically fought against and a lawsuit where NOAA lost, so that program went away. They're trying to re-envision it in a way that isn't quite as, let's say, intrusive as the first iteration was, and asking economic questions every time a trip was going out, and having the VMS hell in hell out system and everything else like that. They're trying to figure out a pathway forward for that fishery, which I think definitely has its positives and has its inconveniences, but I think it'll be up to those guys in our fishery to determine how they feel about it. For my part, so I'm the current chair of the Science and Statistical Committee for the Gulf Council. So I gave a presentation that covered essentially what we did in our meeting, which was um, a new method for estimating red snapper, bycatch, and shrimp trawls, which was done by the Southeast Fisheries Science Center. They had another method that they used for triggerfish, which was a proxy-based method to come up with estimates. Both of those were provided and reviewed by the council for them to ask questions. I covered so we had some Mexican landings from king mackerel, which are pretty interesting. Marcus is actually going to be dealing with that one pretty directly. Basically showed that Mexico's landing essentially a higher magnitude of king mackerel than the United States is as a whole when we combine both sectors.
Our kings have disappeared.
Well, that's
So
exactly what
is-
he's getting
Yeah,
at.
This is one of
That may be why.
one of the concerns. So you have a high magnitude of landings in Mexico, and they're split across really two commercial sectors. One of those is a Mexican gillnet fishery, which seems to be harvesting fish around 17 inches in its modal distribution. So all the fleets kind of select around the same size class, which is around the 30-inch range. And you've
Right.
got one that's responsible for half the magnitude of a country that's landing the same amount of these as the United States. Half of it's targeting 17-inch king mackerel.
And they're
which
just
is-
killing the population.
So that's one of the questions, right? Is that having the impact?
Yeah.
So Marks and their group has had some funding to do some triple tail and cobia research, and it was brought to them of, hey, can we try to answer some questions within this scope to try to get down to it, which is kind of what we talked about.
Mhm.
You identify an issue within a fishery, a potential issue, and you figure out a way to try to solve it and find
That's
an
it.
answer.
It's very applied stuff. We're not out just asking questions that we're just personally interested in. We're doing the work that needs to be done when problems are identified. And I'll say one more thing. Trevor mentioned CFIRE. That's an acronym, but it's an accounting system. It's essentially like a logbook system for charter for hire guys. So we talked about commercial fishermen, talked about private recreational fishermen. There's the charter fishermen. And as a group, the charter fishermen came to the council and NOAA and said, hey, we think there should be better accounting of what we're catching.
The federal guys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's what this program is established to do, is so that all those data can be collected better. So I gave an example of where the commercial guys are stewards. The private recreational guys are stewards. The charter fishermen are stewards. They all care about the resource. And for the most part, they're willing to go through the pain and inconvenience necessary to provide folks like us the better data, the best data that we can possibly get, so we can have an accurate assessment, which should lead to the most removals possible. So it's just another example of where these guys that fish on the water, and spend a lot of time on the water, they're all really invested in these resources.
Yeah. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but is there a system or something that we do everything that we have right, and then another country who's not following what we have, China, Mexico, something like that, and it screws everything else up?
Not really. I mean, a potential example might be what Trevor's talking about. There's something going on with our king mackerel fishery and we don't really know what it is.
Right.
That may be one of the things is maybe but that's only in countries that are directly adjacent to us.
Right.
You know, and it's a good reminder to us that we don't need large industrialized fleets to crash a population. It can be done with what we consider small scale artisanal fisheries. I mean, just right time, right place, you know, very targeted removals. It can do a lot of damage. But by and large, no. We don't have foreign fleets coming in and wrecking our fisheries. Unfortunately, we do a fairly good job of
doing it ourselves,
maintaining it.
Yeah.
I mean, and the flip side of that is that your open seas fisheries, your pelagic fisheries and stuff, you do see multinational competition that occurs, especially on the Pacific side. I mean, we visited a fish house in Hawaii and the tuna and everything else like that. That you know, we observed them. They talked about their essentially catch per unit effort on their long line fleet, and you know what they go through, the observer process and everything else, and kind of the theme you start to get. And Marcus narrated this, especially in the shark realm, because he sits on an HMS panel. But the U.S. fisheries are well governed, well managed, and typically on the international setting, take the brunt of the regulatory process, the observation process, and making sure they're holding to all standards. Not all countries follow in the same suit.
Right.
And so it's almost at times can be perceived as our fishermen are on an unfair playing field because they're held to such a strict standard where other countries' fishermen are able to operate without that same.
I just want to wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, we can say we have well-managed fisheries. I would argue the United States has the planet's best managed fisheries. We do an exceedingly good job, and U.S. fishermen are the most regulated fishermen on the planet. And so when you buy a U.S. You know, seafood from the United States, you can be confident in the sustainability of that product and the health and of that product. It is unfair when our U.S. fishermen have to compete in markets that are flooded with much less desirable products. I mean, it's not fair. It's not a level playing field. Our guys are, you know, hats off to them. They're doing excellent, and our managers, I mean, are doing excellent.
I didn't wear my Make Seafood American again. I should have.
Hey, man, seriously.
Let's make it happen. Everywhere I go, everybody's like,
yeah.
I got to convince them. Let me get one of those.
Oh, you don't even have one? Dang, we're VIPs, man.
It's killer hat. Yeah, I love it. Gentlemen, that was a lot of information.
Yep.
I really appreciate that. That was really good. Have we touched on everything? You had a big paper over there.
Yeah.
What did we round it out?
I was scared I might forget stuff, but I think I covered most of it.
I think you did a good job.
I want to let Marcus get a plug in for his Fishes course.
Yes,
Tell
please,
us about
thank
that.
you. Yeah, so it's I'll call it a clever acronym. I'm saying that because I came up with the acronym. This was before old Chad GPT and all that stuff. Right? So Fishes, fishermen invested in science, healthy ecosystems, and sustainability.
I like it.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's an extension course taught through Mississippi State University, taught by me. It's accompanied by a book. There's a textbook that I wrote, 10 chapters. We cover each of those 10 chapters and cover a lot of the stuff that Trevor and I have been talking about today. It's fisheries science and fisheries management that's relative to someone who lives in coastal Mississippi. That's what separates the fishes class from just a class you could take anywhere else. It's relevant to our fishermen. And so you can sign up for that class online. The lectures are all online, which means you can take them at your own pace. But I encourage folks that are local to sign up for the Fishes course and sign up for the version that you get to come out on an excursion. So I take all the people in the Fishes course. We go offshore, set long lines, pull trawls, just show them what our ecosystem look like. Because it's
is that the course where you do the snapper release thing where you get the you drop it down?
You do. We the first time we offered the sequelizer.
Yeah, there you
we
go.
gave away sequelizers for the first couple of years.
Yeah,
I think we still do that. Yeah.
And,
but it's great. I mean, I enjoy doing the class. I enjoy interacting with local fishermen. It's a great class. So thank you for
this is all through Mississippi State. We
Yes.
find that on your website.
Yeah, and I just was looking that up. So am I correct in saying msucoastal.com/fishes? Is that it? Okay,
That's it.
yeah. And I'll drop that in the comments right now.
Hey, right on.
It's a course. So is that you can sign up anytime? Does it go like a calendar year of a university? How does that work?
It does. you take it in the fall. There's a 5-week period that the course goes on, and we cover 2 chapters each week. But you can view the lectures and take the little quizzes anytime during that week, because what we found is that people's schedules are busy. They don't all want to try to get down to the Biloxi office at 6 o'clock on a Thursday. So you can watch the lectures online during that week, and then the class ends with the excursion. But if you're a teacher and you need continuing education,
CUs,
yes, it counts for that. And it's just a fantastic way to get more familiar with how we manage fisheries in our area and how we provide the science that helps with the management of our fisheries.
Yeah,
Sweet.
we've even talked about sending some of our employees over there to you every now and then.
I love
we
it.
get somebody from out of town or a new technician or anything else like that.
Well,
Just give them
I
some
always
familiarity.
see it pop up. If you need CUs, Mississippi State, if you need CUs,
Let's
Mississippi
go.
State. I don't know why I haven't taken it. Is there actual where you have to report into Mississippi State days? Was that the thing where you had to actually come in and sit? I
Yep.
think that's why I couldn't do it.
And so this year is the first year we've gone to this digital version. The first 4 years, we've only done it 4 years, and that was people coming to the extension center. And I get it. I mean, that's tough. We're all busy, and no one wants to do that just to hear someone like me yabber on, right? So you can do the more boring stuff online at your own convenience. And then if you still want that in-person experience, with the trawl and the
I
sharks
want to
and-
go to that.
Yeah,
I want to do that.
That
That's the
part's
cool
fun.
stuff.
I love
I
that.
definitely miss work for that.
There you go. So you got something out of this afternoon.
Absolutely.
Brett,
Yeah.
I'm looking at your flyer. Don't let me say anything wrong here, but registration is open now through September 24th. Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
And it says, what is this, October 1st through November the 5th? Is that the
That's when the course will run.
Okay.
So that's when, like, for that first week, we cover chapters 1 and 2. So you'd have to find time during that first week to complete chapters 1 and 2. And then the second week we do chapters, 3 and 4, all the way through 10 chapters.
Wow, I'm really glad that we brought this up. Yeah,
Yes, I
this is
appreciate
super
that.
awesome.
And the textbook itself, it's free. I wrote it. You can download a PDF of it right now for free. So it's meant to be distributed to as many people as want to read it, because, hey, we all live and work here in this part of the world, and it's important that we know how our fisheries are managed, both from the management and the science process.
That's awesome. So if you can't hit this one, it'll come back around this same time next year. So it's once a year right now.
Absolutely.
All right, can we up that to a couple times a year?
We absolutely can. If
Yeah.
there
Enough
were,
people
if
sign
there
up,
were
yeah.
interest, if I saw a lot of interest, I would just offer it twice.
Okay. Yeah.
We're gonna blast it out there.
Yeah. That's
If I don't have to go, I think it was because that's always in soccer season for me.
Yeah.
So
right.
it's always if I gotta be somewhere, it can't be there because I'm always doing
I
something
totally
else. You know
get
what I'm saying?
that.
But if I can do it all online, I'm in for sure.
yeah. That's
that was
really
our
cool.
hope. That was our reason for transitioning. Because honestly, I'll miss the in-person interactions during the lectures, but it just doesn't work for most folks
Right.
that I know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
And I already dropped it in the comments, and I'll have that tagged as well. So but
Awesome.
right now you can just click it, and I'll say it for the audio people. It's msucoastal.com and then /fishes. So that's pretty easy to remember too. And again, just click on the links if you're on your phone right now listening to this. So that's really cool. I'd like to that we could do a whole episode on that. I feel like
I will. I'll give you one teaser about.
Yeah.
Why is it called fishes? Why isn't it just fish?
Mhm.
Right? If you catch 3 fish, why are those fishes? And when are they fishes? And when are they fish? And there's an answer.
You got me hooked.
All
Yeah.
right. If I catch one
Yeah,
red
no pun
snapper,
intended.
if I catch 1 red snapper, that's a fish. If I catch 5 red snapper, I caught 5 fish.
Mhm.
If I catch a red snapper, a red grouper, and a tilefish, those are 3 fishes.
I don't think I knew that. Yeah, I don't think I knew that
Doesn't roll off the tongue quite.
No,
as
it doesn't.
but
Right.
that's
Fishes.
Fishes.
because it's the species is that
Different species.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, fishes.
Man, we are educational
Yeah.
tonight,
Learn
man.
something.
We
We
get
passed the
I
first
learned
quiz,
a
I
lot.
think.
Hey,
Yeah.
let's
Kinda?
go.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Gentlemen, thank y'all for coming
Yeah.
in. This is
Absolutely
this is a
cool.
really good episode. A lot of information, a lot of knowledge in this one. So tell some people about it. If you got that friend out
I'm
there,
gonna jump on for sure. I'll
well,
do it
yeah,
this year,
on the classes for
Yeah,
sure,
yeah,
for
yeah.
sure. But
Awesome.
it just all the other information inside of this as well. I want everybody out there that complains or that doesn't understand what goes on their side of things to listen to
It's
these
their own
episodes.
fault now.
Well, yeah,
It's all
exactly.
out there.
It's out there. It's
Yeah.
out there. We're gonna have a catalog. We already do have the catalog, but I'm actually gonna try to trawl it in together and have it like all just as one thing on the website, so you don't have to go searching through all of our episodes. It'll just be one thing right there. So
Really just throwing the puns
I'm
out
trying
there.
to.
Yeah, he's
Hey,
just
you know what I mean?
hooking
I love
them,
it.
trawling them,
Yeah.
netting them, all
I
kinds
do my
of
best
stuff.
there. You know what I mean? So, but yeah. So anyway, again, thank you, gentlemen. Thanks everybody watching
Yeah.
on the lives replays. The Sheepshead Showdown is coming up. That's another fish I was going to mention earlier that was considered a trash
Well,
fish.
that's what I was going to bring up. Kind of like the red drum in Louisiana. Like sheepshead was always trash fish, and now
It's getting hammered.
it's a bumper crop that's getting hammered.
Yeah.
So I know we're wrapping up.
Yeah.
With just a real quick example
gotta say
of
it.
how we work together, right? So Trevor, in his capacity, says, "Hey, the state of Mississippi is wondering about depletion. Could sheepshead be overfished at a certain spot? Do you think you guys could look into that?" I said, "Yes, please, and thank you.
Yeah.
We'll set up these acoustic arrays and all this technology and stuff." So I have a graduate student who is asking that very question about sheepshead in our Grand Bay near. Is it possible to overfish them if you fish them hard enough, or are there parts of the population? How connected is that population?
Right.
So it's a great example of an applied question that the fisheries managers ask that the fisheries scientists can help them answer. And that's why I love this partnership. It's a match made in heaven.
Killer.
That is killer.
Yep.
That is killer. All right. So thanks everybody for watching on the live. We're gonna have to do another one of these for sure.
Yeah,
Let's get y'all
yeah.
back
We'll
like
get you
that.
back in
This
there
is
for
really
sure.
cool. Live replay. If y'all keep tuning in, the Sheepshead Showdown is coming up
October 24th.
There we go. We got it. So
Biloxi Seafood Museum.
registration is not live yet, but it's on its way.
September.
So stay tuned. So if y'all keep